Welcome to another edition of Inside Winnipeg Politics. I'm Kevin Klein, joined by Winnipeg Sun columnist Geoff Currier and columnist Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me again. We have lots to talk about today. Let's start it off because we did an episode last week talking about Parliament being prorogued. And I know we had a story in the Winnipeg Sun that's Facts Matter where we discussed what proroguing Parliament means. So let's just briefly talk about that. Geoff, you did some work on understanding what the proroguing Parliament means. So why don't you fill us in briefly?
Well, there's a fairly lengthy history of prime ministers proroguing Parliament, which is essentially just shutting down the House of Commons. You're shutting Parliament down. You're not dissolving the government. You're not doing anything illegal. You're not doing anything unconstitutional. It's a little bit slippery from a political standpoint, and Royce can talk a little bit about that. But for example, Sir Johnny Macdonald prorogued Parliament. Jean Chrétien did it. Stephen Harper did it twice. This is the second time Justin Trudeau has done it, so people may have short memories, but he did it during COVID as well. And it's generally done by prime ministers to avoid political difficulties. And so it's, as I say, it's kind of slippery, and Royce can talk about some of the reasons that go into that. But what it essentially means is that Parliament doesn't do any work. Now, the business of the government carries on. So the administration carries on, and, CPP checks get mailed out and all the rest of that sort of thing. It just means that bills don't get passed. Any bill that was on the table now dies. And in the next session of Parliament, it will have to be reintroduced as if it had never existed. The exception to that is the new capital gains legislation, which had been put on the table in this previous session. Once a bill like that, a tax bill, is placed on the table in the House of Commons, it's there, even if it hasn't passed. So if you're involved in capital gains this year for your income tax purposes, make sure you understand what the changes are, because they will come into effect.
Yeah, I don't have that problem. So I think I'll be okay. Royce, what are your thoughts on this? Again, to me, it sounds like, well, if this is what happens, Parliament shuts down, why aren't we laying off all the MPs like that? That would happen in the private sector. If a factory had to shut down, we would lay off all the staff. Or if the work wasn't coming in, we'd have to lay off staff, even if it was for a couple of weeks. So why aren't we laying off these people that are MPs that aren't doing any work right now?
Yeah, well, it does kind of cut out half of the work that they would do. Members of Parliament, they're still constituency representatives. They still go to functions. They still do representation work in their constituencies. But in terms of their committee work, in terms of going to the House of Commons, in terms of accountability, their jobs are kind of wiped out for this period that the government gets to choose. There's two big things that I'd add to what Geoff said, which is fantastic. It's that when the House is prorogued, the government can't be held accountable by the opposition. Increasingly, House of Commons, Parliament is all about accountability, about question period. When you shut down Parliament, that means that you don't have Pierre Poilievre, you don't have the opposition grilling you on your decisions once a day for months at a time. It's a real problem. It hurts accountability. And the second thing is that you can't pass a motion of non-confidence. And so Prime Minister can use this to avoid being defeated. That was the case with Stephen Harper, and I think it's part of the reason what's happened with Trudeau here. So people can reasonably be unhappy about this. They can think it's not democratically a good thing, and if you believe that, you should certainly let that inform your vote in the next election. Some people take it the next step. They say that the Governor General should refuse to prorogue the House because the Prime Minister has to actually ask the Governor General to do that. He has to get that approval from the Governor General. But that's not really in the cards. Canada is a democracy. We don't want the unelected Governor General saying no to the Prime Minister, except for in the most exceptional circumstances. So prorogation is a normal thing. It's not something to be horribly concerned about. But if you don't like it, and if you think it's democratically a bad thing, then that should inform your vote. It's something that should be fought in the court of public opinion rather than in the kind of institutions like the Governor General.
Well, I think what's going to happen here, and let's be honest, all these MPs are going to take this time that they're not working for Canadians, going to dinners and such. I don't consider that working for Canadians. They're going to take this time while they're collecting huge paychecks and working towards their pensions to campaign. They're going to take all of this free time. They're going to be knocking on doors. They're going to be making up flyers. They're going to get out to everything they can at our expense to campaign, knowing we're going to have a spring election.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, Kevin. That, but I don't know how you get around that because, as Royce said, that there is still constituency work that has to be done, and the MPs are still accountable to their constituents, if not to each other in the House of Commons. So I'm not quite sure how you deal with something like that if you dock them a percentage of their pay or you tell them they can only work a certain number of days. But yeah, there is precedent for this sort of thing. It goes back all the way through the history of our British parliamentary democracy in Canada. But the reasons behind it have nothing to do with the public good or the national good. All those examples that both Royce and I have cited have to do with a prime minister protecting either himself and or his party. It has nothing to do with what's good for the country.
Yeah, like he remember in Trudeau's resignation speech, he very briefly justified prorogation by saying that Parliament wasn't functioning well. I think he maybe said it was paralyzed. Well, that's not true. Bills were being passed. It was difficult. Question period was happening. And so he never really gave a good explanation for why Parliament should be shut down. We all know the answer why it's being shut down, so that the Liberal Party can have its leadership race. So we don't have this going on in the background. And I think it annoys me that Parliament is being prorogued so that the Liberal Party can sort out its own leadership problems. It can sort out its own internal problems. They can do that, go right ahead and do that, but that's no reason to shut down Parliament. I think it's a bad excuse.